Hey everybody, it's Sunday night. I'm getting ready to go to E3, and I thought I'd jump on real quick and give some of my predictions and some of the things I hope to see over the next few days. Tomorrow the press releases kick off, and we'll get a lot more unveilings and answers. So tomorrow's kind of the unofficial start of E3. Obviously Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday being the show times when we can actually get on the floor and play the offerings that are out there. But there's still a lot of things that are unknown. Some things we do know is that there's a lot of anger over the Xbox One's unveiling, and then its announced handlings of used software and being able to sell your titles online or to friends, and the way that the gifting works. I don't want to dwell on that because those announcements are out there. There's reactions aplenty on the internet. If you're looking for reactions, you can find them. Suffice it to say, the majority of them are negative. So let's start with Microsoft. I believe Microsoft is banking on the fact that they're going to bringing so many quality games to E3 that people simply won't care about the used game strategies and the messaging up to this point. That while there's been a lot of talk about TV and other services aside from gaming, Microsoft is banking that people are going to walk away so impressed that they don't care how developer friendly or consumer friendly the PS4 looks in comparison. You're simply going to have to own an Xbox One because they feel that the best games are going to be there. We know that Microsoft has set aside around $1 billion to secure exclusive content for the Xbox One, be that entire games or timed exclusives with DLC or exclusive DLC content, whatever it might be. Microsoft is really going to be aggressive on that front. We know Respawn's game is going to be exclusive, and we'll get our first really good look at that at the Microsoft press conference. So that's one big thing that they've got in store. There's also going to be the announced exclusives. Microsoft already said they have 15 exclusives coming into Xbox One over the next year, but we really don't know very many of those. We know obviously Forza's one. There's suspects with Fable and some others like that. But here's what I kind of think we'll see overall from Microsoft. Microsoft has put out the most damaging PR content I think I've ever seen a video game company do in such a short period of time. Now, they're not dumb. The Xbox 360 was incredibly successful here in North America, and part of that reason was because Microsoft knew what they were doing. They put together a good business plan and was successful. They saw Sony trip up on their arrogance in 2006, and they capitalized on it in different ways. Now, for Microsoft to go in and make that same mistake, it would be really hard to accept. So I think what they've done is they put out their most PR damaging content first. They're taking their lumps, and then they're hoping to wow us. So some of the stuff I expect to see, I expect Microsoft to take a little bit of a nod to the past, whether that be a Xbox past or gaming past as a whole. We know that they're going to bring Rare out and show a new project from them. We don't know if that's going to be hardcore focused, more broad appeal focused, but they're going to be there, and it's supposedly working with one of, as they put it, a legendary license. There's a lot of speculation that that might be Killer Instinct. I'm not so sure. I think Killer Instinct is a relic of the 90s. I loved it back then. I just don't think it plays with today's demographics, and unless it's an all-new roster, I just don't see it happening. Especially when there's been such strong revivals of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. It can be tempting to roll out those Killer Instinct characters once more, but they are very much a product of the extreme 90s. So that leaves some other licenses to work with. I don't know if you'd consider Viva Pinata legendary, but you could have Conquer. You could go really far back to Rare's earlier days working with Nintendo in the 8 and 16-bit eras, but I think that Perfect Dark is a chance. I mean, I guess that one would be considered legendary, but I don't know. All I expect is whatever they show, they're putting their full confidence behind it, despite the fact that a lot has changed at Rare over the past few years. I think that aside from Respawn's title, we're going to see one or two kind of shocking big exclusive announcements. I don't think it'll be anything along the lines of Madden being exclusive for a year, but it's going to be something pretty big. And people will walk out of that press conference maybe still a little bit angry about the DRM situation with the Xbox 360. But overall, people are going to say, hey, yeah, I don't agree with Microsoft's direction here. I think it's a bit heavy-handed, but they have the games. And in the end, it's where you got to go. I think Microsoft on the show floor obviously is going to be commanding lots of attention. New hardware always does. The PS4 is going to be there as well. But Microsoft, let's face it, they were the winner this generation in North America. Yeah, the story's a little bit different in Europe and very different in Japan. But in North America, Microsoft has yet to be knocked off that top spot. So, early stumbles aside, I think we're going to see a big show in regards to games from Microsoft, both third-party and first-party efforts. I know Microsoft Game Studios has been pretty quiet lately, and obviously that's just because they've been gearing up really far in advance of the Xbox One. I think Microsoft wants their holiday lineup to be the flat-out winner. It just may well be. From Sony, let's move to them for a minute. Sony's not shown their hardware. They've shown the controller, which is obviously the most important part. They've talked a little bit about their used game strategies, but it hasn't been really clear. It varies from we're going to leave that up to publishers to we're not going to talk about it right now to mentions of there might not be much of a change as there is to this generation. We'll have to see where they go. But from the game front, we know that Sony has a lot of big plans. We've already seen, Killzone and Infamous, which to me, whatever. I have a little bit of franchise fatigue with Sony's properties right now. But as we roll into a new generation, I think Sony more than anybody is the company that's going to bet on new IP. They did it with the PlayStation 3 and games like Uncharted, Killzone. They all worked out. Well, I guess Killzone was a PS2. It was born there, but it was really kind of given the limelight on PS3. But they banked on newer IPs. Resistance, which may or may not have worked out so well for them, but at least they were doing it. Sorry for that background noise. So I think they're going to do that again. Familiar faces will be there. We know that. Sony loves to lean on their established franchises. But, man, time to turn down the volume on the pinball machines. We know that, and I think that they're going to try and get a couple of new IPs that they can release sequels for throughout the PS4's generation. So expect more new IP from Sony than probably anybody else at the show. Microsoft, very third-party reliant. Sony has a very deep first-party system, and they're going to be bringing out in big numbers. I think that like last year, the Vita's not going to get much play on stage. I have a Vita. I like it. I've tried to support the thing, but Sony's just really not putting much muscle behind it. I'm hoping that with the PS4 that it's a lot more integrated with the Vita and that it kind of revives the handheld a little bit, but I'm not expecting to see a whole lot on stage, and I'm expecting its presence to be pretty small in the booth, seeing how they want the PS3 to finish strong and they want the PS4 to, obviously be the big hit this holiday. So it just doesn't leave much room for the Vita, and that's a shame because I do think with a few key moves, Sony could get it turned around, but they're running out of time. So expect Sony also to continue to support indie development. Be on the PS3 and the PS4, they're going to have a big presence. Their booths last year had a lot of space dedicated to indies, and they're coming back. They've been pledging their support to Sony consoles, and it's great to see. So expect more of that. I think it's gone from an experiment to a core strategy of Sony at this point. With Nintendo now, Nintendo's already shown their hardware. We've had it for a while now. It came out earlier this year. And the 3DS has been out. It's a well-established system at this point. It's in the third generation of its software, and the presence of the 3DS is going to be very, very big. I know Nintendo has to get the Wii U rallied, and there's going to be plenty of games for it, but I think this is going to be a really big year for the 3DS. Nintendo's still got a stranglehold on that market. Obviously, mobile's taken a big bite out of things, but the 3DS is still tracking very well in sales compared to the DS. And there's some great games that have come out recently, and there's some great games on the horizon. And Nintendo's really going to, thump their chest about that because, let's be honest, the Wii U it's not performed well at all. I mean, it's poor. It's a very poor performance on the Wii U. So the 3DS is going to be kind of their, hey, look how great we're doing, rallying cry. But obviously they need to get things rolling forward with the Wii U. We know Smash Brothers is going to be there. We know that we're going to be seeing something from Retro. And, well, let's hope it's Metroid. 2D, 3D, whatever it is, I want Retro to be involved with Metroid again. And I feel like they're still the best company to do it. The Tecmo stuff that they did with Other M, it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it was kind of a left turn for Metroid that kind of really, I think, messed with the canon a little bit. And hopefully, if Retro gets re-involved, they can kind of correct that position a little bit. And for me, that would be the most exciting thing we could see from Nintendo, is just a really good Metroid game that takes full advantage of the Wii U's hardware, or the 3DS if it's going to be a 2D adventure. Heck, a 2D Metroid could probably support some sort of crossplay between the Wii U and the 3DS if they did it right. Some of the other things that I expect to see, I think we'll have to see where Mario's going. Maybe he won't be ready this year, but we gotta see what the Mario Galaxy team is on right now. I think it would be a big deal for them to show, that vision of what Nintendo can do with Mario. And Mario is always Nintendo's strongest point. Super Mario Galaxy, I think it's one of the 1 and 2, you can kind of consider them one thing. I think it's one of the 5 best experiences from this generation, and I don't see any reason why in the next generation we couldn't get another defining game from the Galaxy team. They're extremely talented, and they're always coming up with things that we just didn't know we wanted, but once we get them in front of us, they're just great. So really hoping that that's going to be there as well. And we also know Mario Kart's going to be there. Every system gets its Mario Kart, some of them too, but we definitely are excited to see what happens with Mario Kart, and I'm expecting it to be in playable form and probably a lot further along than people are expecting. But if you think about it, for core fans of Nintendo, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, those two together do a whole lot. We're going to see more about the sequel to A Link to the Past, which is great. Not sure if we'll see a whole much more about Original Zelda, because the sequel to A Link to the Past and the Wind Waker HD remake, those need to have their time and they need to have their space, and it would kind of be a shame if they were overshadowed by a new Zelda. Not saying I wouldn't want to hear about it, not saying I wouldn't want to see it, but I think Nintendo will hold that for another time. Nintendo's going to really please their core. They're going to. They have to. The Wii U is darn near on life support. There's still time for it to turn around. There's still time for it to get going. But, I mean, time's running out. Really, Nintendo's so far behind where they needed to be at this point. They needed a very big lead over the PS4 and Xbox One before they launched. They're not going to get there. I don't think they're going to all of a sudden start selling 1 million units a month. But they needed to be several million ahead of these just to get that third-party support, because with the gap in power between these machines, unless the install base there, third parties just aren't going to port down. It's supposedly easier this generation, but they have to be guaranteed that there's enough of a fan base to sell to for them to do it. I just don't think Nintendo has it. It's a shame, but the reality is Nintendo's going to have to carry the Wii U, and this is the year they really have to show us that they're capable of doing so. As far as third parties go, I hate to say it, but I really don't think it's going to be that daring of a year for them. At the end of a generation, a lot of the things that come out are, well, I don't want to say rushed or shovelware, but I'd say they go to B teams a lot for the current generation stuff. You get these games that are sequels to big franchises, but they're not necessarily the publisher's best effort as far as backing them and giving them the best tools to work with or budgets, simply because their A teams have moved on to the newer consoles, and anytime you develop a game for the first time for a new console, it's going to cost more. There's a learning curve, there's not as advanced tool sets out there, whatever it may be, that's going to demand a little bit more attention. On the same side of that, first generation games for a new console generally aren't as good as second, third, and so on generation games. So they kind of play it a little bit more safe. There's going to be some tricky stuff that's going to use the console specific hardware strength early on. A lot of those times they just kind of prove out to be a little bit gimmicky. So I think this time around, third parties are going to be playing it pretty safe. They're going to stick to really well-established genres. They're going to stick to really well-established gameplay mechanics, and they're probably going to wait till next year to start really pushing the envelope on creativity and new concept. The way the industry's been going, they have to have big hits this year. With the new consoles, who knows how well they're going to sell. If they sell in low numbers, those publishers have to be sure that the attach rate will be high so that they're going to be able to sell their games to smaller install bases. And a lot of these games, they're going to be cross-generational, where they're going to be PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One. So they're held back a little bit by the current generation. Doesn't mean the games won't be good. It just means that it's not going to be the greatest year for innovation. If I wanted to look to anybody to kind of break that mold, I hadn't given it much thought, but obviously Activision, EA, Ubisoft, they're going to be the ones that are going to be most playing it safe because they have the most to lose transitioning from one generation to another. Square Enix is going to be real interesting because they've taken a beating recently, and they're kind of in a weird position. They need to get their big franchises out, but at the same time, their main franchises haven't sold all that well. I mean, Tomb Raider sold well, but it cost so much to develop that it hurt them. So they're in an odd position where they kind of have to come up with some fresh concepts, but it's really risky to do so, because if they come up with something that's new and it's quirky and then it doesn't pan out, we're going to see a lot of really bad days coming from them going forward as they're trying to adjust to a new generation change, and the fact that a lot of their core franchises just simply aren't in demand like they used to be. Going back, if anybody's going to be the quirky developer this year, I think it's going to be Sega. We have the Sonic game coming out for the Wii U that's exclusive, but they've got to have a few other things in there that are just straight out wacky. I mean, that's what really made Sega special during the Dreamcast years, is they just were willing to be bold and try new things. Obviously, we know that the Dreamcast didn't make it, but a lot of that was out of their control with the way EA was refusing support and some other factors with the Dreamcast. But I think Sega has the luxury to be that quirky company. They haven't been the giant franchise player lately, so hopefully Sega surprises us. As far as temperature of the show as a whole, I think Microsoft will make a lot of headway in getting back in the good graces with gamers. Obviously, nobody's going to be happy with the way that their system is so locked down and it's heavy-handed with the used and pre-owned gaming market. But like I said, we know the games are going to be there. We know they're spending money, and I'll tell you, just having those games may not give outright forgiveness, but a lot of acceptance. And I think that will really kind of help Microsoft out. Sony, out of all three of the major companies, has the most to gain. And I think they're going to continue to make strides in public perception. Now, Sony's probably going to announce some sort of restrictions on used games that's going to make people unhappy, but it's not going to be so heavily locked down. So, in comparison to the Xbox One, people will look at it favorably. They'll still maybe grumble a little bit, because I'm sure it'll be left up to publishers whether they want to allow the second-hand gaming or not. And we kind of understand that publishers have been fighting for that control for a long time. So in order to not lose too much third-party support, I'm sure Sony will have to implement some sort of system like that as well. However, there's not going to be nearly the amount of control. So Sony's going to probably still say hi on the public PR, and if their first-party efforts come through strong and they get enough third-party support, maybe an exclusive or two, they'll be in great shape going to the holidays, and I do expect them coming out of the show to still be looked at with the most positive outlook. Nintendo, they're a bit of a crossroads. They have got to get their base rallied. There are so many Nintendo fans that have just simply not picked up a Wii U. The Nintendo-only crowd has shrunk quite a bit, but there's tons of 360 and PS3 owners that bought the Wii as a secondary console. And I think that's got to be the route that Nintendo goes again. They say, all right, we understand that for your core gaming, you're probably going to own a PS4, an Xbox One, maybe both, but we're going to make it so you just feel like you have to own a Wii U because we're going to bring it with our software. And it can't just be established franchises. Yes, Pikmin still has a lot of draw. Zelda, Mario, Metroid, Mario Kart, all of those, tons of draw, and they'll be there and they'll be happy. But dang, pinball machine going off again. But they need to also show some more creative new IPs. And if they do that, I think the analysts, the general audience will say, hey, the Wii U, maybe not right now, but in 6 months, a year when those games are out, I'll pick one up. And by that time, they'll probably be cheaper as well. So what Nintendo needs to do is they need to weather the storm for another year. But for that next year, they've really got to roll out stuff that's going to make people say, all right, I'm saving up for an Xbox One or a PS4 this holiday. Maybe in the spring I'll pick up a Wii U after another price drop. And after that Mario Kart game hits, plus that weird funky thing that we saw at E3 that's coming out that just looks so cool with that tablet controller. They've got to do it. If they do it, they'll be in great shape. I don't think they'll have the top outlook coming out, but people will stop singing the doom and gloom songs about Nintendo and planning their funeral. Nintendo's going to be fine. They shouldn't have taken this long to get these franchises out and in front of their fans, but somewhere they tripped up their development schedules, and we know Nintendo takes longer than most, but I do think that it's going to be a very good show for them, and I think everybody's outlook with Nintendo will be a lot more positive. I think that about does it. I don't want to be cynical, but I think there's going to be a really kind of an odd feeling come out of E3 about an uncertainty with the industry, a feeling that, man, these publishers, they don't build it for gamers anymore. They build it for profits. And that's the sad reality of the situation, and what we have to deal with is that the publishers and developers have gotten so big in this industry that they can't survive on just making whatever game they want to make. They now have to make the game that will just sell the most copies, and that's business. That's true, but it's really been about making the best game possible for so many years in our industry, and it really changed, I'd say, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit earlier, but we saw Activision really starting to crank out those Guitar Hero games and start cranking out the Call of Duties, and EA's countered by putting out Battlefields where they've attached these crazy big single players to them, and that really had never been part of the franchise before, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot of things that are going to make us shake our head like, why? Why does feature X need to be in game Y? Lots of weird multiplayer modes attached to very strong single-player games, and vice versa. And it's just simply because these publishers and developers are just pouring so much money into getting these games out that they need to maximize return. Hopefully, at some point, there'll be some sort of market correction that will bring things back to quote-unquote the good old days, but who knows? I just think that coming out, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. Gamers are going to be a little bit confused, unsure if they really like what they're seeing, but there's going to be a ton of great games mixed in. New generations always inspire returns of big franchises or kind of new iterations of existing franchises that kind of go in new directions. So we'll see how it goes. I'm really excited for the show, really excited to see what we end up with. And day after E3 wraps up, we've got The Last of Us to look forward to. So should be a fun week no matter how it goes. For those at home, I don't know if you'll have a Best Buy near you where you can go out and try the Wii U software. If you do, I'd suggest doing it. I'm sure lines will be big, but it's a pretty unique concept. And if it's something that works well, it could always be expanded. Maybe rather than just partnering with Best Buy, Nintendo will just get some space around the country. Maybe Microsoft and Sony follow suit. So that'd be really cool if that evolved into something bigger each year. as far as gamer theory, over the next few days I'll be posting articles each night, hands-on previews, opinions, and I'll throw up some wrap-up daily videos as well, as I did last year. So that's it for this pre-E3 predictions slash expectation, or whatever you'd want to call this. But thanks for listening and for watching, and stay tuned to Gamer Theory throughout the next week. And always, if you want to email, it's just jeff@gamertheory.com, and I will address kind of a Q&A during the middle of E3. Last year I had tons of questions and I couldn't get to them, so if you want to kick those out this year, I'll be a lot better about that. And probably Wednesday night I'll do that Q&A, and probably tack them on the ends of my daily wrap-up. So thanks for watching, stay tuned, and we'll be back with more.